Jimmy.
Go Hawks! Go Hawks! Oh, sorry. My bad.
Are they playing today?
No.
Oh, okay. I didn't think so. I got an all-timer for you today, Jimmy.
Joe. Selection Sunday.
Oh, yes, I got an all-timer for you. All right. So
I'm looking at the background, so give it to me. Just give me the news again.
So you look at the background, you think I'm in a car, and you're like, oh man, he's in a car. He must be traveling somewhere. No, he's not, Jimmy. No, he's not. Because that's the school right there. That's Fall Creek, which means over wherever this is. I can't even tell.
You had it right the first time.
Right there. That's my house right there.
Oh, yes.
That's my house. My house. The house that I pay for. My house. So you would think I could do this in my house, Jimmy? But no, Jimmy. No, because everybody's home. And there's nowhere to do this thing because I'm relatively loud. So what do? I get in the car and drive across the street to a school that I know I won't be in trouble for sitting in the parking lot because there's one cop in town and he knows who I am. So I'm good there, right? But at the same time, I can't be in the house because I'm too loud and I'd wake everybody up and then I'd have to deal with that. And it just wouldn't be the situation that I want. So all three kids are home. Andrea's sleeping. Dogs are sleeping. So I had to get out. So I get out and I'm thinking I'll take my car out, but I can't get out because the cars are all blocked in because my kids' cars are there. Get into my kid's car and it's disgusting. It's disgusting in here. I don't know. Like, clean it one time. I paid for this too. Clean it one time, Jimmy. Just one time. This is disgusting. I don't even know if I want to say this is ridiculous. So that's where I'm in. So I'm in a mood. I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm in a mood. Last night I was in a great mood. Marquette wins. They go to Big East Championship tonight. Fantastic. Great mood. Wisconsin won yesterday. They're in the semifinal today. But here I am in a disgusting car across the street because I can't be in my house. Take that.
Well, Joe, that's actually a good lead into our talk today. But
of course it is, Jimmy. Of course it is. Why are you so calm? Why you gotta be so calm, Jimmy? I don't need you to be calm right now, Jimmy. This is not what I need.
Joe, I always wonder one thing though. Why is it when you sit in the car and you don't want any attention drawn to you? You probably shouldn't be wearing a stocking cap. Okay. You might as well put a ski mask on.
My guy,
right.
It's Wisconsin, man. It's Wisconsin. It's like 43 degrees. So of course of course I do. Come on.
That's not too bad though. 43. You should 43.
No, I'll take that.
At 7:30 in the morning for you, Joe. That's pretty good. You should take
It's
that.
not bad. It's not bad. How you doing, man? How you doing? I'm excited to see you.
Buddy. I'm laughing at you because last week, not last week, actually, I don't know what day it was. Maybe it was Wednesday or Thursday. I was doing a virtual session with a group of principals in Ohio.
Yeah.
Keela comes in, she goes, "Boy, you're fired up today." She can't go anywhere in the house either. She's like, one day she was downstairs working out. She came up. She goes, "What was going on up there?" My office sits above the workout room.
Right.
And I said, "Well, I just get a little fired up, just a smidgen, Right. But anyway, yes. So hey, super excited because you know what? Last night, you know what I was doing?
What?
My wife and I were making book cover designs. Do you know what book cover designs for, Joe? There's just one book that might be coming out. There's just a little rumor. It's called The 1 Minute Walk.
Yes.
52 walks, right?
Yeah.
52 walks. But I'm so excited for that. I'm excited for you. It's going to be awesome. People love those walks. It's a great reminder. What I love about it, it's something that people are going to be able to use constantly all the time. It's timeless, Joe. Yeah. So we're super excited for you. So congratulations. That will be coming sometime here in the next couple of months.
Yeah, we're hoping.
I'm
hoping that we can get it out before July because that's where everything starts. It's interesting that you say that because they was super fun to put together, and it's like I took there's 100 of those walks, and I took about 52, a couple more than 50, over 50 of them, put them all in it was interesting looking through all of those walks because they all kind of came at a certain time of the year, obviously. And it was what I was thinking about at that time of the year, but it happened over 5 years or almost 6 years. So it was so interesting that as I was looking through all 100 of those walks and deciding which ones should go in the book, that the same themes kind of came up at the same time of year. So like there was, like maybe 3 walks in October, but for 4 years or whatever, all of a sudden you've got 6, 7, 8 walks to look at from that time of year. And you're like, it's the same stuff. It's the same conversation happening because a lot of times the same things are happening in schools in terms of where people are at. So it was fun to take a look at all of them. And then all I did was kind of put them into 4 seasons, the season before school starts, the season from when school starts to the winter break to spring break, and then spring break to the end of the school year. But the themes kind of kept coming back. And it was, so the whole walk to work process to me it just provided purpose in days that I needed purpose. And I hope that that's what it does for other people too. So having them in a different medium and being able to read them, and then having the QR code and having the reflection questions, I'm just hoping that it helps people. So it was the 1 minute walks, the actual walks were the most fun I've had doing content. I loved writing Lead From Where You Are, but at the same time, the walks, because they were like you get the immediate, response to them. They were my favorite, and like I said, they did provide a ton of purpose to what to how hopefully we could help people. So that'll be, I hope, we'll figure it out. But I appreciate your help in that, and Hugh is helping that, and we'll see how it goes. And so I don't know, we'll see. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
And they're just always so good too, and so impactful. Everywhere I go, people are like, oh yeah, I love Joe's 1 minute walks, and I said I love his 1 minute and 49-second walks so better.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, ironically, we're talking about it, and this is about where I end every one of those walks.
That's right. I'm looking for the bike rack. Where's the bike rack?
Bike rack's right behind me. That's right. Go cricket bike.
Got the mongoose. So hey, anyway, it's funny you say that, right? Because we talked about that and how your book really just fell perfectly into those themes, right, of the year, those themes of the year, and seasonal almost in some ways. And I feel like we're in that season again right now. I don't know what your feeling is as you're out in schools and so forth, but I feel like we're in that season right now. And that season being, it's a tough stretch for so many reasons. But I also know the fact that, it's funny, Joe, because obviously I've been out of it now crazy for 6 years. But as I reflect back on it, you do kind of forget some things, right? And that's why I love being in schools, because it quickly snaps me right back into those moments, right? Of closing a school year while you're trying to open a school year, right? I'm just kind of going through the things I dealt with this year, or this past week. Closing school year, opening school year. Registrations are finishing up, getting those schedules ready, having to have difficult conversations with teachers that might have to be moved or be in RIFT, or we're in the hiring season as well. We're doing all of that. At the same time, we're trying to finish our observations and get those formal observations completed and those summative evals done and taken care of. I mean, there's just so much going on, not to mention you also want people to enjoy the end of the year, because that's when, as the year comes to a close, there's all these events, there's all these celebrations. This is a tough time. I know as soon as people get back from spring break, it's like you are just on fire all the way to the end. So that's one of the things that I think people try to do and make sure they take care of here as we're going down the close. So I was thinking about all those things, but one of the themes that comes out of all that, Joe, is what I'm seeing also is the amount of conversations that need to be had for different reasons. And I still think that's an area, Joe, that I continue to see people struggle in. And it is hard, right? Because it's a skill. And it's also because I know people worry that they don't want to hurt their culture. They care about people. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. It almost gives us anxiety sometimes when we have to have those conversations. I think a little bit of it as leaders, we feel we're going to get beat up a little bit. It's like a teacher who doesn't want to call home. It's not because they don't want to. it's a little bit, I think it's a trepidation a little bit. Like, how is this parent going to respond when I tell them their child isn't behaving? Or how is this parent going to respond when I tell them they're not doing X, Y, Z? And if you ever get a bad response, it almost creates a little bit, it almost creates not this hesitation, but also a loss of confidence, maybe a little bit of stress and so forth. So I don't know if you're seeing that or sensing that, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Like, how can we help people navigate these really difficult conversations that sometimes need to be had? But I got a lot of thoughts on that as we go through, because I'm thinking of specific examples that people shared with me this week, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that today.
Two things. First thing, you're totally right in terms of the time. I was with a group yesterday. We had, and I was virtually with them in New York. We had 3,800 educators in New York, virtually. And it was. I said to a couple people that I got really nice texts back and DMs back, and they said thank you and everything. And it was really weird because I didn't see anybody in this virtual session at all. I'm here, 3,800 people in all different areas, whatever, and I'm just going, right? But and this is gonna sound weird, Jimmy, and I said this is gonna sound weird. You could feel the energy, and I don't know why, but you could just feel it because they came in and you could feel, just tightness almost. But then as I kind of got through, I saw some of the retweets, I saw some of the comments. I had, my phone number was up there and people were texting during it, and you could kind of get this. You saw this momentum where it was almost like a shift. People starting to believe, people starting to connect, people starting to think about the good stuff that was going on. And it was a really weird feeling because I shouldn't feel the energy from 3,800 people that I can't see at all. Like, I couldn't see my face wasn't even up. Probably better. But all of a sudden I get some messages, I get some momentum, and then you get this, then all of a sudden you feel like you're making a difference, which was really cool. The reason I say that is because I think when we don't know what the answer is going to be, and we can start to get some momentum, then it's easier to carry through. Example, when you're going to have a hard conversation with someone, doesn't matter if it's a parent, if it's a teacher, if it's a staff member, if it's an administrator, whoever it is, the response to that interaction is almost solely dependent on every interaction that you've had with that person leading up to that tough conversation. So if you haven't been in those spaces at all or had any conversations with them, when you have the difficult conversation, you're going to feel significantly more nervous walking into it, because you don't have all of we used to call them Seinfeld conversations here, right? Seinfeld was a show about nothing. The conversations about nothing tremendously impact the conversations about something when you have to have a conversation about something, right? So all of those interactions leading up to that tough conversation determine A, how you walk into that conversation and the confidence that you have in that conversation, and B, the reaction to the person that you're talking to in that conversation.
And it's funny, right, Joe, because we can predict that we're going to have conversations with people, right? And I think that's what's so, I always try to help people understand that, like, if we can predict that, then why don't we protect ourselves a little bit by really thinking through what process do we have in our head, or how are we going to navigate this conversation? And shouldn't we be consistent in how we navigate that conversation? Because the danger is if we don't really have a process to think through that, then you kind of leave it to chance, depending how you feel that day or what's going on in in your busy day, or if you're having a great day or a rough day, and how we might potentially mismanage that conversation. So I was trying to think yesterday to some people and trying to help them understand. So if we can predict it, then, especially if you think about admin teams, right? If you have 2 or 3 or 4 people on your admin team, and everybody has those conversations differently, I think that could be a little dangerous, because what will quickly happen is that people will figure out who they either want to have the conversation with or who they want to avoid having the conversation with. And some people we know maybe come across a little harsher in their conversation, right? People, I'm not going to say they're mean about it, but they might come back with a more direct tone. Let's use that word. And so people get kind of nervous around these people, and then unfortunately, we might label these people that they're, oh my God, I want to avoid them because there's this little bit of a fear factor. Then we might have another individual who might be like the empathetic, compassionate person, like, oh my God, the way they talk to me, I don't feel beat up when I leave, but I'm clear what they're asking me to do. Then we might have the person who does not want to have the conversation at all.
Right.
They just avoid it at all costs for whatever reason. And so all those inconsistencies create issues. So that's one thing I would say is, if you work with a team of people, it might behoove us to get together with all our people and say, hey, when we talk to people about things, and those things are typically almost always people that are underperforming in some capacity, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're going to have those really extreme cases where there's some egregious behavior that's very inappropriate that might result quickly in a suspension or a removal or termination. But I'm talking about the day-to-day stuff where people just aren't doing their normal everyday job. And so if we can begin to think about it that way. So yesterday, for example, I'll give you an example, is sometimes you see things and you watch the behavior of people in an organization. When we talk about culture, we always say, well, look at the behaviors. That will tell you something about the culture. But we see a behavior happen and you can watch the other people, and it's almost in their minds, they've labeled these people because it doesn't surprise them that they behave that way, number one. Right. Then the second comment that often comes is they make some comment about it. But what they do not see is, yeah, but you're the leader. And if you know this behavior exists, then why aren't we doing something about it? Mm-hmm. And that's the part. And there's 100 reasons why we don't. Right. They're nice people. I like them. They've been here for a long time. I don't know. They have a bad reputation, and maybe they'll come back at me. Maybe they're part of the union. There's 100 reasons. That's why we should never judge it. But it does create a point of curiosity in terms of, I wonder what's going on there. Like, why are they saying that to me, right, of all people? They know how I feel about that, and yet they still say it, because in the moment, they don't see it themselves. They actually think the problem is the other individual, when they don't realize that is a leadership issue when we allow people to behave in ways that either hurt the organization or don't model the behaviors that we expect as an organization that might be deemed excellent. Hey, we want to be a great culture. We want to be excellent. But now at the same time, we're letting these behaviors happen that aren't. And yet, rather than let's look at and reflect on our own behavior about how does that happen, it's easier to look at those individuals and blame those. And I know we talked about this on a show, 6 months ago or whatever, but it's a theme that continues to come up over and over and over again. And I still believe it's one of the biggest issues I see in schools today, is that people are allowed to behave in ways that do not align with the values of our organizations. Right. And that skill continues to be problematic for a lot of people. And I'm dealing with it everywhere I go right now with leaders who are struggling, who have people on their teams who do not get along. They have grade level team members that don't even speak. They have people who don't come to meetings. They have people who do not contribute anything. They have people who separate themselves and don't talk to each other. And these are all behaviors that we allow. But I always say I give them grace, because I know when I first started, I struggled in those same conversations too.
Absolutely.
And so again, those thoughts. So I'm sharing that only for you, but also for the people who are on today. Maybe they have an idea or a thought. How do they approach those conversations? What's one thing that you think works for you that you'd be willing to share? That you think, here's a strategy I sometimes use. Here's some things we try. But those are very complex, because even when we think we do it effectively, we can still hurt feelings, and those hurt feelings can quickly hurt us because people run around and gossip a little bit about how they believe they were treated in those situations. So anyway, thoughts on that, buddy?
Here's what I'm thinking about is the first thing that where you started was what I think we really need to think about in terms of teams. And you talk in frameworks all the time. And I think that the idea, if we're talking about a group of people, when you said it may behoove us to have a conversation, no, Jimmy, no. The answer is we need to, that's the expectation, that as a group, we're going to respond the same way, right? So if they come, if somebody who's upset about something comes to me, and because they know I'm going to react a certain way, or they don't know, and then they go and they don't get what they want, and they go to somebody else on the team and ask the same question to get a different response, there are times that they don't even need the response that they want. They just want a different response. Because if they get a different response, then they can go tell everybody that the administrative team's not on the same page. And then all of a sudden we get this chink in the armor as a team, right? Because now they're like, well, how are we supposed to trust them? Like they're all over the place. They don't even, I asked a simple question. And when I asked a simple question, I got two different answers. So when we have a framework that says, if you bring me something I'm going to ask a clarifying question or 2 clarifying questions or 3 clarifying questions. And then I'm going to say, we'll get back to you when we've had a chance to discuss it. And then making sure that you get back to them. But if everybody, and that's just an example, but if that's the framework that we all utilize as a team, now we've put ourselves in a situation where they're not going to go to everybody to get something different because they know what the response is going to be. That's from the team perspective, right? The second piece is the individual perspective. If if I told you at the beginning, if I told you in July that you're going to have a difficult conversation with a group of people or a person in your organization, right? If I told you that in July and I said, the thing that you'll need to do is before that difficult conversation happens, make sure that you know and understand where this person, these people are coming from, you would go and spend more time in that space because you know you're going to have that difficult conversation, which means if I say that to you right now and say, like, you know, you're going to do it, then we got to start early in terms of having conversations and being in places where we know some of those conversations are going to happen. And you may not even know, which means that's why we need to figure out ways to be more visible in all spaces. And if you start hearing I shouldn't say it like that. Oftentimes you'll hear little things, about certain areas of the building or whatever. And just being present in those areas can do a couple things. The first thing it can do, it can give you a pretty accurate indication of what's actually happening because the person that's telling you that those things are happening might not be accurate in what those things are happening. But if they are happening, now you're in that space. So if you have to have that conversation, it doesn't feel as awkward at the time that you have to have the conversation because you've been in that space. The most awkward conversations I had in this building were tough conversations where I didn't know what was actually happening. I just heard what was happening, but then I had to address it as a superintendent and I didn't know it. But at the same time, I'm trying to make a judgment call based on what I hear from people. It just makes it really difficult. And I don't know if it's accurate, right? Because when I go to the person and have the conversation, they could be like, well, that's not what happened. Why are you talking to me? Why aren't you talking to these 3 people? They're doing the same thing, right? And so I think that the more visible that you can be in those spaces, the better chance you have when those tough conversations have to happen. And I know about it because, when I was gone and then something was to happen, it was so difficult to walk into that space. I mean, and that's my own fault. And I set it up that way. I mean, that's on me. Okay. I'm not going to make an excuse for that, but it made it more difficult without question. So I think the first thing that I would say to people is visibility doesn't ensure credibility for those conversations, but it certainly helps it.
Yeah. So it aligns right with what Maria's saying. I'm looking at Maria's comment here, right? And actually Allison's as well. And I look at Maria's first and, again, a reminder, a couple things is, first of all, as leaders, what are we modeling, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes we can fall into the same trap that we sometimes are hypercritical of our staff when we're behaving the same way. It's the same thing that staff does in the way they behave, and they become hypercritical to students. So there are parallels between admin and teachers and students. That's one thing for sure. So that modeling is so important. But she's talking about what you're saying is those conversations, we want to make sure they're ongoing, that they're consistent, that they don't only happen when we have to go address somebody. And that's what
correct.
You're saying, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Invest in those relationships prior, because we can already predict that we're going to have conversations. So why would we wait for something to happen? Let's establish as much as possible. And again, this doesn't mean it's going to fix every problem. And I know everybody always has a staff member that they want to tell me, yeah, but that wouldn't work with this staff member. I'm like, I know, but that's because that staff member needs something else, right? We still have to understand, why would that staff member need something else? Well, that's their story. We have no idea what experience, so let's find more about those experiences. But at the end of the day, it's not our job to fix these people. It's our job to be fair to them. It's our job to be clear to them in our expectations. And I had a conversation with the principal this week who said to me, Jimmy, I actually went to my staff after talking to you because I realized, and I apologized to them, I had not even been clear my own expectations.
Right.
Sometimes, again, we just miss these little small things that do make a big difference in the impact of an organization when it comes to the culture of our organizations. And, same thing with Allison here. Hello, Allison, by the way. Allison from Georgia, Maria from Virginia. Allison says, I think it's the same thing, right? When you have a process, it helps you because maybe that process keeps you from coming in too elevated, too aggressive.
Right.
You kind of take the emotion out of it a little bit because, again, those conversations can get emotional. And then, boom, there we go. We go sideways on these conversations. And now we kind of hesitate to have them. It's almost like we lose confidence a little bit. So again, that modeling is important by us as leaders. So when it comes to having these conversations, number one, are we modeling the behaviors that we expect them? In other words, whatever they're doing. Number two, the idea of expectations, that we've been clear in those expectations. It's not fair to expect people to behave in certain ways, yet we've never been clear how we're going to behave in this organization. Or we believe we're clear, but yet we still allow those behaviors to continue.
Yeah.
So why do we have these expectations, right? So basically people are opting out and saying, well, I'll behave however I want to behave. So one strategy I think, we can often look at when we look at behaviors that don't align with how we expect people to behave, and we've seen this 1,000 times, and that's one of the things I love about Ted Lasso's movie, is that reminder to approach things from a point of curiosity.
Right.
Because when we approach it from a point of curiosity, we're therefore not judging it. We don't know why the behaviors exist. So what if in our heads we said, hey, when we see a behavior, if our point or our approach was to come from curiosity, like, I wonder why they're doing that. I wonder why they got upset. I wonder why their body language. I wonder why they were late. If we come from a point of curiosity, now we can go do what I would call a wellness check. And that's one thing I know. I have an administrator I work with in Virginia who shared with me that he's been working on that when he opens up any conversation. He says, Jimmy, it has helped so much because I feel it changes the conversation very quickly and not into, it takes the nervousness away. It's not some confrontational. I want to approach, I care about my people. He says, it's so funny that I care about my people, but yet I would never take time to really start every conversation to check on how they were doing. And the reason that's important is because we know this, that if we have to have a conversation with somebody and we start with what I would call a wellness check, if we know from that first question that they're not in a good space or not in a good place, why would we have that conversation with them in that moment? They're not ready for that conversation, right? We speak about emotion, that's when the emotions come out, right? It's like, hey, I'm dealing with a lot of crap right now, and you want to talk to me about this right now? And if we don't know that because we're moving too quickly, then I think we create that undercurrent for ourselves sometimes. And it doesn't mean that we're going to avoid the conversation. It just means we're going to circle back and have it at a different time when this person's in a better place. Because again, we never know what's going on in that world on that moment, on that day, or whatever happens to be the case. So those are a couple things I think will help, even if you just had a 2-step framework. Hey, I'm going to start from a point of curiosity, and I'm going to start every conversation with a wellness check. And if you want to add a third one, hey, after talking to them at some point, I have to remind them what the expectation is. And more importantly, what am I going to do about it if they keep violating those expectations? Then that's when the conversation has to change, in my opinion.
So 2 things that come up with that. The first one is the idea that what we're talking about is people that are, we're in this, we got to have the conversation, but it's not the immediate conversation, right? Because if there's an immediate conversation, you can't do a wellness check and say like, so it's got to be something that this is ongoing. So that's important to know. But the second thing is, I think there are times that I was in a situation where, the expectations, not only were they vague, but they were vast. Like there was a bunch of them. And then they're like, the mission statement is 3 paragraphs. This is the handbook has all of these expectations. And you're like, my gosh, like if I can't remember them, how am I supposed to make sure that other people remember them? And when we come back to simplicity on that and dial it down to what are the 3 things that we need from each other, or 2 or whatever, 4, I wouldn't go more than 4 to be honest, but 2, 3, or 4 things that, these are when Joe leads, he's going to lead in this capacity. And when I go to Joe, I know I'm going to get this response, this type of response in moving forward because it's simple. I talk to our groups a lot about, be simple, unique, and repeatable, right? If you're simple, unique, and repeatable, when you're telling stories about schools, then you become somebody that can be remembered, right? Well, it's the same thing with this. If you're simple, unique, and repeatable, everybody can tell what's going on. It just helps the tough conversations when they happen. So I think that's a big deal in terms of making sure that you're repeatable in the knowledge that when someone comes to you with an issue at all, like they know what the response is going to be. And that to me is a really big deal, because a lot of times that does not happen. Because the emotion gets involved in it. It's not always bad emotion. Sometimes it's really good emotion. If it's good emotion, like, I'm really excited, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And then you go back and you talk to your business manager about it, and they're like, yeah, you can't buy that. We don't have any money for that. Then you got to go back and you're like, I'm really sorry. Like, it's just not going to work out. Well, now guess what? Not only have you knocked that person down, but now you've put the business manager in a tough spot because they're the person that said you couldn't do it. Right. Yeah. So I think you got to be real cognizant about how you're responding to questions and doing that. And Jimmy, you and I have been listening to that book, Unreasonable Hospitality. Yeah. And in Unreasonable Hospitality, one of the things that was really that kind of hit me was how we address these behaviors, like in that we praise with emotion and we redirect with little to no emotion. Right. Mm-hmm. So when the emotion gets in the way, I'll praise publicly and emotionally. Right. But I'll always address privately with little emotion. Yeah. With little emotion. Right. Mm-hmm. And that, I think that will help, even if that, like, that's a framework too, Jimmy. Right. Yeah. Like, absolutely. That's a framework in terms of how you operate. If they know that I'm going to praise publicly with emotion and I'm going to redirect privately with no emotion, then they know when they walk into that room for difficult conversations, what that's going to look like. And that does take the edge off. It should take the edge off a little bit, because they know that I'm not going to be there slamming. We're going to have a tough conversation.
Yeah. It's like addressing the behavior, right? And it's not about, don't make it about the person, make it about the behavior. It's the same thing. And it's the same thing. What I love about it, Joe, too, from a leadership perspective, and this is the takeaway for me always, is the reason these things are so important for school and district leaders is because part of it, to me, is we're modeling and teaching at the same time how we expect those individuals to have conversations with other people.
Absolutely.
And systemically, we're a healthier organization because we're aligned in our expectations, but we're also similar in the way we address individuals, whether it's students or staff, right? And that we're all using a process that is similar because it is done with dignity. It is done with respect. It is done with compassion or empathy. And those things are really important from a leadership perspective. And we have to constantly keep those things in mind. So as you were talking about it, I kind of go back to that same thing I always think about is, and this is one thing I would share for our staff. And you kind of touched on it, Joe, when you're talking about those 2 or 3 or 4 things. This is why it's important that I think, and this is something I never thought about, and it just makes so much sense. When I ask people today, where do you lead from, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you draw it from? And what I'm referring to is, every one of us have experiences in our lifetime that have landed us where we land. We have things that are very personal to us in terms of our expectations, in terms of how we expect ourselves to behave, but those around us. Think about those things as values. So those are the things we value the most, okay? I want our people to kind of think, what are those things? So think about it this way. Those values then become part of your leadership language. Yeah. We want to talk to people using our values because I think it does 2 things. One, it is very clear in your expectations, but what it does for you as a leader, it makes you predictable. Yes. I want people to know how Jimmy would respond to that because it is so clear to them, and not only how he would respond, but why is that so important to him? Mm-hmm. So when we share our values with our organization, it's important to share why are our values? What's the story behind them? Why is that so personal to you? And so now people begin to understand, and what happens is they almost kind of protect you. Well, you have to understand that story, why that is so important to Joe or Jimmy or whoever, right? And so here's the thing to think about. Let's say everybody's on this thread here this morning. Hey, we actually have some people here, Joe. Let's say these people on the thread this morning, I asked you right now, write down your core values on a piece of paper right now. And you can write 2 to 4 core values, okay? Whatever those are. In other words, what is it you want your people to know about you? And why is it those are your values? And then I want you to write them down. And let's say you wrote them down. And tomorrow or Monday morning, you're walking in your school and you have those core values in your hand because you're going to start trying to develop a leadership language, which means you're going to use those values as you talk to people. So an example would be, hey, you know how important it is to me that we champion for our kids, right? Like, I understand you're frustrated. It's okay. I'm not mad at you, But listen, where I'm struggling a little bit is, you know how important it is to me that we champion for students, but you're telling me you're not going to allow that student to make up that quiz, right? Or that test. Well, that's going to hurt this kid's grade. In fact, you probably won't even be able to pass the class anymore if you give them a 0 on that test. So that would be an example, right? So my point is this: you write your 4 core values down on a piece of paper. You're carrying them around as your leadership language. But then some point during the day, you don't even realize it, but you drop that piece of paper and it lands on the floor in the hallway. And a teacher's walking down and they see a piece of paper and they think, oh, somebody, littered on the floor. I'm going to pick it up and throw it away. And they pick it up and they look at those 4 core values and they say, oh, crap. And they take it to Joe Sanfilippo and say, Joe, I think you dropped your piece of paper here. Yeah. That would be where you want to get to. Can you get to that point that people know exactly who you are and exactly what you expect, and more importantly, why you expect that? Because that is the story. And it always goes back to Joe, is this is why it's so important that we know our people.
Correct. And it's important that we put it out there to know, so they know us, right? Because otherwise, you're like, and I think, people will listen to this and they'll be like, okay, so next year I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, right? And we do this all the time. It's like, well, we're going to wait till the timing is perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Like, start it now. Go write down your core values, write down how you believe. And then and honestly, once you write those down and you know what they are, if they're 2, 3, or 4, whatever, go talk to people in your organization and say, this is what I believe. Do you see this? Yeah. And you don't need to do it with everybody, but do it with some people that you trust, just to start, because then you can bring it to everybody later. But when you start it with a conversation and say, this is who I really want to be, and you ask the people that you trust, and they say, well, the 3 of them, absolutely, but the 4th one, there are days, right? Good. Now I know, and now I can kind of think about how I lead through those spots. So, man, that was. I can't believe we're at 37 minutes already.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Holy cow, that was.
You know how I know it, Joe? Because you're glowing again, Joe. You're glowing. You got this glow to you right now.
Listen, Jimmy, I do what I can. I do what I can, Jimmy. I do what I can, Jimmy. It's just what it is. Did you see? There were like 3 people that walked by. The only problem with being in town in the school across from my house is when people walk by walking their dog, I got to wave at them. I can't not wave at them. So now I got the opposite situation from when I'm in a different school. When I don't want people to see me, now I got to at least say hi to them.
Joe, I know you think I'm laughing at you, but I'm not. I'm laughing at David James's comment right now.
I don't want to know. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know.
David James, 2 points for you, David. 2 points for you. You are spot on. Joe is got a little glitter on his face.
Oh, don't ever say that again. Don't ever say that again. There's probably glitter in this car. I'm just going to tell you right now. It's awful. I can't wait to I'm going to go wake him up. I swear to God, I'm going to walk into that house. I'm going to wake him up. I'm like, go get a vacuum.
Joe, you ready for this?
What?
Do you know why the car is a mess this morning?
Why?
Because, Joe, that car's been a mess for a long time. How come you haven't had the conversation with him? Why have you been avoiding it?
God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I hate that you're right. Okay? I hate that you're right. I'm done. We're out.
People will behave, however we allow them to behave, Joe.
Close this thing out. Close it out. That was the biggest mic drop of all time. I can't believe you just did that to me. I can't believe it. And you're 100% right. And I hate you and love you for it. But we're out. We're out. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to fight after this. We're going to totally fight. Go away. Put your culturized stuff away. Nobody wants to see that made up word stuff. Get out. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
God bless everybody.